Hey guys, last week in Deep Dive we started a new series on the book of Genesis. And even though we can't meet together in person right now, we want to continue that series. And so, if I can, I'm going to share with you for a few minutes from Genesis chapter 3. And this is a section that is typically referred to as the fall of man. If you recall last week in the first couple of chapters of Genesis, we heard the creation story. And this all culminated on day 6 when God created Adam. And he created him in his own image and placed him in the Garden of Eden. And he gave him one command. He said, "You must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will die." And God went on to create the first woman, Eve, as a helper for Adam. And so the two of them were there together in this Garden of Eden. And they were given dominion over everything. And now in chapter 3, Satan enters the equation. And he's going to try to tempt Adam and Eve to eat from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he enters the scene in the form of a serpent. Now we know that Satan is a master deceiver. That's what he does. It's what he's good at. And he looks at Eve. And Eve was not the one who heard this command from God. It was Adam, and it was Adam's responsibility to convey it to Eve. And so Satan probably looked at Eve and said, you know what? She's probably going to be the weakest link. And so he goes to her. And in verse 1 he says, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" So what Satan is doing here is right off the bat is trying to sow doubt in Eve's mind. And not only that, he's distorting God's command. Did he not say, you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And Eve catches this and responds, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. So Satan moves on and tries a new ploy. "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when his first plan didn't work, he moved on to simply denying the truth of God's words. And in verse 6 we see that Eve looked at this fruit, and the fruit itself was tempting to her. It says that she saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom. What we're talking about here is something that is pleasing to the body and pleasing to the eyes and pleasing to our ego or our sense of pride. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, it says it this way, "For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life come not from the Father, but from the world." Guys, these are the same things that tempt us on a daily basis. And we see in Jesus' own life, he was tempted this same way. In Matthew chapter 4, as Jesus is getting ready to start his ministry, he's fasting in the wilderness for 40 days. And Satan comes to him, and he tempts him, telling him to turn these rocks into bread. And so we're talking about something that's pleasing to the body. And he takes him to a high point and shows him all the kingdoms of the world and says, all these can be yours. And so he's showing them something pleasing to the eyes. And he tells him to throw himself off this high point and let his angels catch him. And so it's something that's pleasing to his ego or to his pride. But unfortunately, Eve gives in. And it says that she took some and ate it. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. And guys, this is where sin enters the world. And in the following verses, we start to see the consequences of sin. Remember in chapter 2, at the very end, in verse 25, it says that the man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. But now, in verse 7, after eating the fruit, it says, "Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves." So now shame has entered the equation. But the real consequence for sin can be found in verse 8. It says, "Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees in the garden." This is so fundamental to what we as Christians believe. The consequence for our sin is separation from God. Whereas Adam communed with God before, he was now separated from God. He was withdrawn from God. And we continue to see throughout the rest of this chapter, the curse that God put on man and woman and on the serpent. And, really we could spend a lot of time just talking about chapter 3. But really what I want you to take from this is that Satan is a master deceiver. And he is still setting out to deceive us on a daily basis. And we are human. We're going to fail at times. But as we heard last week, there is hope, because this isn't the end of the story. We've got a creation story. We've got sin entering the world. And we've got this story of God redeeming us to him. And so, as you go throughout your week, I want you to be on guard for Satan's schemes. I want you to try to run from those schemes as fast as you can. But when you fail, know that there is hope. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Even though we can't meet together right now, we are not shutting down. We're going to have more stuff for you in the coming weeks. So make sure that you continue to check back on the social media. And have a great week. Thanks.